there's a better way to do it. And, if you go back through history, and we all know our history to a degree, that like at one point hemp was like a currency, and, the British monarchy like forced people to grow it. And I had a few little notes, so I want to do some factoids for you. And it's actually found in the Stone Age, if you can believe it. In the Stone Age, in a Taiwanese village, they found pottery with impressions of cannabis cord in it.
Well, hello, everybody. As you log on, I'm excited to see you today. It's been a little bit since I've been on, and I was just telling Pat that I feel all out of sorts, and so probably makes him even more nervous. But either way, it's easy and casual, and I'm excited to have you today. For those of you that are just joining us or have not been on before, go to globalhempassociation.org, or you'll find all of our content that we post or other videos on YouTube and now on Patreon at Global Hemp Association. And you'll be able to see it's a one-stop shop for all of the content videos and things that we've posted. But I'm really excited to have you on today and chat a little bit about what you've been up to, Pat, and your experience in this industry. I've been following you for a little while now and happy to introduce you, but if you wouldn't mind giving yourself a little introduction and tell me a little bit about your background and then how you got into this industry.
Okay. Well, thanks for having me. I really appreciate this. And so when I get started, probably about 27, so a long time ago, hemp became legal in Canada. And I was so excited because I was basically spoon-fed through school. You're the generation, you're gonna change it. All this crap that we've done, you guys are gonna fix it, right? And so then going through the whole party excess phase, and then came out of it, and I'm like, what am I gonna do? And I became an electrician, made a good living, and then at the point, then it became like, well, what is there anything more? A decade went in with the legalization. The seed market had blossomed. We got a very healthy seed market in Canada. Manitoba Harvest is a, shining star there. And after a decade, I'm like, well, where's the biodegradable cups? Where's the paper? Where's all the stuff that's going to help us become a little more sustainable? Like just the blue box program, put cardboard in there and plastic, and that's not enough, right? We got to do more. And so I started investigating how can a different way be done that you're not mashing the herd into the fiber and then beating the hell out of it to separate it. So instead of combining the two and then separating the two through multi-million-dollar machinery, having a different way, just out of left field. And full disclosure, I'm not an engineer, but I'm very passionate and I have the means to make things happen. But yeah, go ahead.
So I have a question really quick. We're talking about you and I. This happens a lot, and I absolutely understand where you're at. Can you help a listener or somebody else understand what we're talking about when we say smashing? We're talking about the decorticating process, or the separation process in the breakdown of the fiber after it's been harvested.
Yeah, typically it's done with a hammer mill. It's basically a Chitlin decorticator. If you know your history, in the 1930s, pre-war, this fellow Chitlin, brilliant guy, came up with this idea with scutching rollers, and basically you feed the hemp in and it just beats the hell out of it. And it's basically the mechanical version of the hemp break, which would just break it into little pieces, and then they beat it and beat it and beat it, and then you get a decent fiber. But there's a better way to do it. And if you go back through history, and we all know our history to a degree, that like at one point hemp was like a currency, and the British monarchy like forced people to grow it. And I had a few little notes, so I want to do some factoids for you. And it's actually found in the Stone Age, if you can believe it. In the Stone Age, in a Taiwanese village, they found pottery with impressions of cannabis cord in it. Like, it's the freaking Stone Age. And then you got mainland China in the 2nd century. making clothes, and they didn't have decorticators or hemp machinery. Everything was done by hand. And so they would peel it, and you can actually still buy it in China. Hand peeled ribbon fiber is about $7 US a kilogram. And just this thing just kept burning inside of me. Like, there's got to be a different way to do this. And I just, how when you've got a dream, things kind of open up. And there's a lot of pitfalls, and I went and fell in a lot of them. But the first stop, was a machinist, an Italian machinist, post-war, where it's probably not politically correct to do this anymore, but he told me when he was about 12 years old, they had a test. So he's Italian, and basically the test is to see if you were going to become a blue-collar worker or a white-collar worker, like a doctor or a lawyer. And so he fell into the blue-collar. And so basically, from 12 years old on, he learned everything machinist. And so when I met him, he was actually my father-in-law's neighbor, huge shop, like just to the nines of stuff. He would rebuild things like mills, process equipment, just unbelievably smart guy. I gave it to him as an idea. Hey, can you check this out? I'm really interested in this, and blah, blah, blah. And he did it. And he was able to demonstrate that when you splay the end of a hemp stalk, it's got to be a fiber grade or a dual purpose grade. Then you are able to then mechanically peel the ribbon from the bast and the ribbon from the herd. And so, and any farmer can tell you that when it's actually in the field and it's green, the lignin has not dried. And it's like a glue. So you've got basically a wet glue when the plant is alive, and then it dries. And that's what we've been working on, is the dry part of it. And when it's, to get it in the field is our next goal, to have a farmer working with us and to grow it the way we would like to. I'm getting ahead of myself. But,
okay, real quick.
Yeah.
I have a couple of questions. When you cut the stalk, right, and it's a fiber grade, what visibly looks different for people? Like what?
I'm glad you asked. I actually got some here. So when you peel the ribbon from the herd, because the fiber is so strong.
Lift it up.
Oh, there we go. I don't know. We got a little too much light on it, but
yeah.
So this is a full ribbon. It's coarse. This one is approximately 3 feet long, and
okay.
yeah, we basically. So if I could go back a little bit, and so that meeting Joe and telling him about this, at the time they'd been basically cutting the tops off the seed to recover it with a combine, processing it, and then the leftover stalk they were burning in the field, and that was their dirty little secret. And for years they'd been doing that, and it's just like, for a guy that's expecting, a little more advancement, and to hear that they're actually just burning it to get some carbon in the soil, and just to hell with the atmosphere and air pollution, it's a free dumping ground. I was just like, I couldn't not do anything. And so it started light, a little investigation, doing a lot of research. I went out to Kamloops, a place was like 4 hours away, and the mayor there was promoting hemp and growing hemp, and I actually had a meeting with him. And I was this starry-eyed kid, and he's like, if you don't have $1 million, don't bother, don't do it. And I'm like, well, I don't have $1 million, but I'm really interested in this. And so I kept going, because whenever someone told me I couldn't do it, it was more of a spur to
watch me.
Yeah, watch me, basically. Yeah. So moving forward with Joe, we had some personal health problems. He had to back away, and then I had this basically a small prototype, basically a bench model. And this is a long story. You could shut me down anytime.
That's okay.
Yeah, so I'm a subcontractor at that time. I'm doing jobs at a greenhouse. They had to replace their wood boiler. And so it just took wood chips. And what had happened was when you burn, you produce like a carbonic acid, and it basically will eat at everything. And so their existing scrubber would basically deteriorate it. So they'd hired this company, and they had these scrubbers that were basically like massive washing machines that they would add lime into, and then the flue gas that would come out would be scrubbed and then go out. And that was all well and good. And the fabricators that built it for these engineers that were in turn selling it to the greenhouse operator, they didn't have money to pay me. So I did all the controls, wired up this whole process. Everything worked great, except they hadn't dialed in their pH meters. And so they're basically, it wasn't working because their pH was off, and I didn't know how to add the lime. So it basically became a bit of a shit show. And so I was owed a lot of money. And then these fabrication guys, somehow they were supposed to pay me. And I'm like, well, you know, Joe's kind of moved on. You owe me a lot of money. I've got this prototype. Maybe you guys can take this to the next level. And it became a bit of a trap because they built it exactly that way. They didn't, like, it was just Joe's idea. It worked, but it needed a lot more development. And instead of developing it, they just kind of made it a lot bigger. And so I kind of went downhill. Basically, we were able to prove it. I had the National Research Council involved. They were supporting the project financially. But at the same time, it was basically going to fail because there was no real engineer saying, hey, looking down the road, you're going to need to do this and that. And basically, at the end of it all, the one consultant for the NRC, who's an ex-process engineer for Coca-Cola, brilliant guy, Daryl Wardrop. And he's like, great, so you're able to demonstrate this linear peeling. Now you need to make it rotary. And I'm like, oh shit, like, why didn't you tell me that before? And so then it kind of started this whole next, page chapter on so basically those guys are just, I realized they were just yes men building whatever I asked them to, but I'm not the engineer. Mm-hmm. So really I need someone that's gonna really help out, and blah, blah, blah. It ends up, I just sheer will made this rotary version, and it worked just enough, not motorized or anything, just as a prototype proof of concept. And I was able to demonstrate to the NRC, look, this can be rotary. And so they gave me another injection of money, and I was able to then get an engineer to do a computer animated drawing. Actually had that made, laser jet, had their water jet, and laser cut all the pieces, put it all together, and it worked, but it was limited in, it didn't have a lot of variability. So it wasn't very well suited for the commercial operation. So, and then at that point, I just refused to give up, and I just kept trying different ways and, tweaking different things. And actually had a guy from Israel helping me out for a while, and he's a great guy, Roman, but at the same time, he was just doing kind of what I was saying. It wasn't really like, oh, well, I see the bigger picture. If you do this, then that would work. And then enter Dave, my current partner, who's a brilliant guy, multiple patents. He came up with a debarker, really interesting design. It didn't fly though because they're existing debarkers, and I think this is kind of what I'm running into now. So just to keep things moving, so Dave was able to hot rod the design, but it was still limited in the it needed to be very confined parameters for the hemp to get peeled, and that's not good. And I had one of the hemp pioneers, I put a video out there of once everything was done, and he's like, great, so I can retire by the time it's done. And he was right. It was limited in what it could do. And Dave's like, this is quite complicated. I think I could make it a little easier for you. Can you pay me to investigate it? And I'm like, yes, please. An engineer that is actually interested in making it better? Yes, I'll do it. So he did it, and he came up with this. Like, he can't even thank himself. He's like, God, it just came to me in a dream, and he showed me, and he built a little wood prototype, and it was just like changed everything, because now the variability was there, the speed was there, and actually that the way that the design was made, that it could be fed top end first. Basically, the machine sits about 4 feet off the ground, and then I saw, light went off in my head that he didn't know, and that's that there was a location in the machine that it could have a degumming aspect, and there was a way at the beginning, before I was ready to really understand it. There was a fellow, Terry Barman, another hemp pioneer, way back when it first legalized, and he was very passionate about it. And he actually came up with he called it a biomimics solution, which is basically an enzyme to cottonize the fiber. And so I sent him these samples. He's like, I really like what you're doing, and blah, blah, blah. This is going to be huge. But I wasn't ready. And so he actually shared drawings of his degumming rollers. He's like, this works. I want you to have it because we really need to move this forward. And, once you get it going, then we can work together and use my biomimics. Well, that didn't happen. But at the same time, the whole degumming aspect kind of stayed in my back pocket. So now fast forward, now I could see where it could be in the machine. And then once we got to the point where it's like, okay, Dave, I think we should build this. I like the concept. It's simple. It allows a lot of variability, and I like the degumming. You can put degumming into it, and that this could be what is really been waiting for all these years. And so I put the money down, had the thing cut and CNC. We fabricated, mostly Dave, and he's a brilliant welder to boot, and so he did everything, got it ready, and then we're at the point where we're kind of stalled, and basically there's a bit of greed has gotten into things, which really sucks because he's a God-fearing man. So am I. I think we're just part of a grander picture. It basically we're at a standstill, and he wants to be, or I don't want to get too far into this, but we had this agreement, and for each stage, he would be getting a release of funds. And so I gave him the first release. It looked like it, we're like, this is where I started pumping things up, because I'm like, okay, we're at the point where we can prove it. And but we needed the feed system to be able to show it going at the speed that it should be able to go at. So he builds the feed system, and it basically mimics what would be in rows in a field. And
are you cutting and retting on field, or is this green?
No. This is gonna blow your mind. So, based on last year's research, working with a hemp farmer, we're basically copied a 2003 research paper from the University of Manitoba, where they were able to modify MacDon swather to 4 feet high. So the header bar, raised it just above 4 feet. And then what they did was they went through the crop, they took all the tops off, gently laid them into the field. And then where it got a little silly was then they went all the way around the field again, and they then lowered the swather to ground level, and then they went through it again. And then they made a windrow of the stalks.
So the stalks are on ground then, laying in the ground?
The stalks were in the ground, yes. And so what we took from that was, what if there was a swather at the height to take the tops off, and then like a sickle bar attachment down low to take the bottoms off? But we don't want the stalks. Well, again, there's an evolution and a lot of learning. At the time, I thought the stalks would be left in the ground, like just in windrows, and then they'd be picked up. But what happens is there's no end. Like, there's no beginning and end. It's just one continuous stream. And this is where I was running into trouble with farmers. They're like, I got bales from years ago. Can you use them? I'm like, no, because they're all broken and random and no beginning and end. And so with Dave's design and with the way the rows go, that if we were to cross cut that field, have the top cutter, which we proved works, and prior research proved it worked. And actually, by doing it earlier in the season, a little earlier, because I've talked to some seed breeders, and they're like, that'll dry really quick. So you don't want to leave it in the field too long, because what'll happen is it'll dry too fast, and then it'll shatter as the combine picks it up. So like that's a consideration. But really, this can be totally overcome by just doing it when it's ready to be done. And so what happens is we've got the tops get windrowed, and in the same machine, which is going to end up being like probably the length of a bus, top header takes the tops off. Now we're left with approximately 4 feet of this stalk. And because it's a fiber crop, that it's a lot denser. There's no branching to speak of. And basically the concept is to lower, more like a paddle wheel header bar behind the swather, down lower, taking those leftover stalks, feed them over at a lower ground level sickle bar, just a few inches off the ground, just high enough that we're just above that barky bottom, so we have a more consistent fiber all the way up. That then cuts it, drops it onto I'm just going to super simplify it, like an elevator, and then that elevator is timed to feed each row into the ribbon decorticator, and it's going at such a high speed, and we're using the rows as our timing. It never touches the ground, so the stalk gets pulled into the machine. The herd is going at such speed, it's getting thrown into a chipper, basically a corn forager chipper, and the big chutes that you see in those huge operations, blowing into a trailer, so the herd never touches the ground. The characteristics stay consistent. There's no microbes of dirt interacting with the herd and causing it to degrade and change, where a downstream processor would be like, hey, this is not like the last crop, it's different. Well, it has to be the same because we're doing it right. It's not touching the ground, it's all getting chipped. And then at that point, now you've got chipped herd that can get taken away to, say, a pellet mill. And then now your logistics, you've compressed everything, and then it can be distributed to whatever multitude of herd, energy pellets, paste herd.
Yeah. So when you talk about your textiles, like you're talking about supplying with this ribbon decorticator, long fiber, textile grade fiber, right?
The samples, I've handed them out to engineers, and the most important ones were the NRC and the CIC, which is the Composite Institute. And they said that if that fiber is degummed, or the ribbon, raw ribbon is first degummed, and then cottonized, not really, I don't like to say the word cottonized, whitened. It's whitened, so it's all the same color, basically. Then it's useful for composites, and then you could then card it and then go through spinning mills and textiles. So we're targeting composites to begin with because it's the least amount of steps to monetize the ribbon. And so that's our third commodity. Yeah, go ahead.
Talk to me about the benefit of the ribbon. Like, what's the appealing piece to this type of decortication or processing?
So this
help me understand, like, what is the end user really looking for that this is a solution?
Okay, that's a good question, because the ribbon, now this goes back to the beginning, like 12,000 years ago approximately, when they were peeling it. And when they're peeling it, you're not introducing the coarse herd. And then when you've basically scrubbed off that degumming, the outer thinner epidermis, the bark, you want to call it, then now you start to get a softer fabric, and it's so strong. Like there's documented, cannabis is a derivative of canvas, and in the Vikings, they used it for rope. sails, caulking, and lace. Like they don't really talk about it, but when you hear of lace, you think, oh, that was flax. No, it's flax and hemp. You can actually make the finest linen out of hemp because it's so strong. And so this ribbon that we're producing, and I didn't actually finish out that with the herd getting chipped and then put into a trailer that's accompanying the machine, the ribbon basically is being thrown into a round baler. And so we've got basically pure ribbon on an onboard round baler. And at that point, we can scale this, right? And then that round bale would then be emptied out, taken off field, and then it can be dried and then further processed, and then boom, now it's composites. And so with the Composite Institute saying that yes, that is a viable product, NRC saying so the Composite Institute, they're like, with composites, yes, degum it, whiten it, we will take it, anyone will take it. And then on the textile side, use our enzyme. They've got NRC has for a decade, these guys here, I got my hemp shirt on just in, solidarity, Hemp Town. And they became HT Naturals. And at that point, HT Naturals worked with NRC and they formulated this heat tolerant enzyme. And then they parted ways, and then NRC is still able to license this enzyme. And they put their enzyme in it. And Terry Barman, he used his biomimic solution on it. And they were able to whiten it. It was freaking amazing. I have those samples, I've got them buried somewhere, but this was so long ago. But it basically looks like this.
Well, and I'm curious about that degumming phase, right? This is what everybody talks about in the U.S. is this degumming piece.
It's huge, yeah. Very
yeah, who's doing that?
A lot of guys are doing it separately. So they'll get their bales, or there's another fellow in Montana that they're drying it right away. He's got a novel process, and I wish him the best of luck. But basically, I gave him this ribbon, and this is a sample, and it basically it's hard to see with this light, but it basically just whitens it. So it's more of a consistent color. And the beauty of it is there's no chunks of herd. Like you see all these small...
Is there a secondary processing then? So this is this is actually the harvest and the first processing piece, right? And then from here, it'll go to a secondary processing where the degumming, the whitening, is that right?
Yeah, so what we are seeing is, and it's a viable way to do it because the degumming can be on board. So this thing is like a green waterfall, rows going into it, being peeled, degumming. I can't say when, but it's being degummed inside the machine, and then that the ribbon that's coming off. Like way back in the beginning, my consultants who's going to buy this 4-foot long ribbon? Like nobody wants it. Like there's no market. But when you have the fiber already separated from the herd, you're miles ahead. And like the fellow in Montana, he was saying we take it off, they take the whole 9-foot crop with our special cutter onto a conveyor, and then we dry it, and then we then give it to the downstream people who then degum it and then further process it. And well, you don't need to degum it after. That's another expensive step. Like what if you can in the field get your and this is the whole thing started with a dual purpose crop, seed and fiber crop, and the fiber is getting burned in the field. So it always was, how do we utilize that leftover stock and at what point? And then there's so many guys doing their own thing, and I'm all
and you have to think too is regulations. I always wonder about this when you bring up dual purpose crop, and I wonder for the textile industry, is that something that's sustainable? This is a conversation I wonder about, because in China they're doing it, and in other countries they're doing it, right? And it's what?
Why not here? Yeah, North America.
Well, that's what I mean. Yeah, and so I'm curious about this step, and how do you fulfill a fibrous plant? And a 4-foot plant is pretty. Like what is the full length of your crop? Because that's short compared to a lot of the industrial harvest I hear.
Yeah, so typically, like, you can let it grow. Like, if you plant when the soil's approximately, 10 degrees Celsius, I'm sorry, I don't know Fahrenheit, then basically you get your seed germinated. And I know people say it's drought resistant. Well, yeah, once it's established, but you need to baby that seed for about 2 weeks. Good watering, good fertilizer. Don't let people say you don't need to fertilize it. Fertilize the shit out of that. And then, so you have a healthy crop, irrigate it, get it going to the point where it's established, the canopy takes over, and then it crowds out the weeds. So there's, and then, I heard about silica being a necessary component to strengthening the core, make it stronger in any heavy winds and such. But, so there's been a lot of learning, and I am not saying I'm a know-it-all. I am not an engineer. I'm an electrician. And basically, I'm just passionate about this, and I want it to happen. I don't want to get ripped off for all the hard work and sacrifices I've made and my family's made. But at the same time, it's necessary. And
it's opportunity. It's knocking at our door right now, right? We have this big opportunity to make change, and I'm fascinated by the ribbon you're able to pull. And what I look at is this industrial market for tarps or boats or sails or the ropes. We talk textiles on a fine grade fiber, but what about the rest of the industry?
This is samples from hemp traders. So it's 100% of hemp. And my understanding is it's still in use for heavy cargo ships. And it's just an amazing, and then you get your canvas. I don't know if you can see that. 100%.
Yeah.
It's just amazing. Like, I'm such a believer, but at the same time, I get it. There's a lot of guys that'll smoke a joint and then be like, let's do this. It's like, no, it's like dedicated research, and you got to keep grounded because there are a lot of folks that are entrenched in the status quo. They don't want it to change. Hemp became illegal for a reason. And actually, technically, if you really get into it, it never really became illegal. They just taxed it out of existence. And it became so difficult that
it made it no longer cost effective.
No,
right? And I think that's what we're running into now. In order for us to really bring it mainstream, we have to have this piece figured out so that we can scale it and become competitive in cost, right? Exactly. It's this, the chicken before the egg, or the supply and the demand. And I really appreciate that you gave a good example of the hard work that this has taken. People ask me all the time, if hemp's so great, why aren't we just using it?
I know, it's the technology. The technology.
Yes, there's so much.
Yeah, there's a lot of guys out there, well-meaning guys, very brilliant guys, and they've got multiple patents, and they've got all the engineering experience at their fingertips, and they're thinking, and I'm not taking away from them. I'm totally appreciating anybody in this space, anybody that's actually doing something and not just talking about it. Right on. If they're just talking about it and they don't do anything, get lost. I don't have time for you. And basically what they're doing is they're reinventing existing technology, because that's what engineers do. They're like, okay, that worked, so let's use that and make it better. You're still beating it together. You're still crushing it all into a big mess, and then you're getting more machinery to separate it. And even these guys are like, oh, this is great. No, it's not great. I can see the herd. Like, that's still got to get taken out. And I actually got in an argument. This guy, Alberta Innovates, they're supposed to be helping. And please don't sue me. But I talked to the guy that's like, they've got a Van Dommel machine. And they've had it for like probably over 15 years. And I said to the guy, what about the textile quality? Oh, that's another attachment. I was like, why don't you put it on? Like, what's the deal? And they get all that, oh, well, there's a lot of space and blah, blah, blah. I don't get it, man. I'm sorry. Like, you want a high quality fiber for textiles and composites, because we all know that the strength to weight ratio is actually better than steel. And then you can, the way that it works, and a lot of people get confused with this because it's sort of flexible, and so it lends itself to turbine blades and wings in planes. So it can it's light, it's strong, and it can handle being a little flexible. And so really, when you go toe to toe as a structural component in, say, glass fiber, hands down it would beat it. And then if you introduce, okay, well, let's factor in the carbon footprint. Well, how do you make glass? Well, that's a blast furnace, and you're melting sand, right? And then you're extruding the glass into bats. And then, you take concrete, for example, like hempcrete, yes, it's not a different component. It's not structural, but it can be used for all your interior walls. And I did a lot of research way back, and in the UK, they've got hundreds of buildings. And the most one notable that I remembered was brewery, because the humidity, it naturally breathes. And they said their heating and cooling requirements went way down. And it's like, well, if it's better, why don't we use it, right? And so
factor.
Yeah.
So I've got a question. Do you need, or does the industry like the automotive, aerospace, I imagine NASA for rocket ships, if it's got the strength and the durability that it does, what I hear, are they more attracted to this long fiber? I mean, is that what they're using to build their, replacing fiberglass? I mean, in fiberglass, you get these long strings, right?
Yes, and it's going to be quite small for textiles. But to answer your question, see, this is the problem, is that our timing was off. So probably about 7 years ago, Boeing, they were experimenting with it. Magna International were experimenting with hemp. Problem was the manufacturing and processing wasn't really there. And so they're getting this lower quality fiber they're using, and it's like, it could be good. And then to answer your question with the ribbon that we're producing, I see different new processes, like utilizing that full ribbon for, say, concrete reinforcement, say in take Iraq, or somewhere like a war-torn place where you'd have concrete and then you'd like reinforce it. You might have seen it. They'd reinforce it with fiberglass. So that's my own personal thing, but I'm, again, not an engineer, it's just a thought. But you can cut that ribbon to length. You can get the exact parameters that you need. And so it would basically be just to follow that stream through. So bales of ribbon taken off site, dried, and then unwound, and then put through the enzyme, put through carding, and then at that point, depending on the end user, for textiles, for composites, then it would be macerated, existing technology, basically cutting it to length. And what I'm really excited about is there's a fellow that was using recently the hemp ribbon, and he was carbonizing it through torrefaction. Ancient torrefaction. It's an ancient technology they used to make charcoal. And basically what he was doing was he carbonized this, basically turned the ribbon into like a form of charcoal. And he's making it as a precursor to carbon fiber. And then you've heard about all these supercapacitors and move over graphene. Hemp is a lot cheaper to make. And that's what I see. Like if we're able to...
Why fiber?
Yeah, take it off the field, dry it, maybe even not dry it, carbonize it right off the bat. Like, holy shit.
Yeah. Why? I'm curious about the carbon factor, why the ribbon fiber is the benefit. Is that where all of the carbon is in the outer, the fibrous part, not the hurd?
The hurd is got fibers in it. They're a lot finer.
Sure.
You can use the bast fiber. The bast is the rope, the textiles, and then with the herd, to me, I would just be like chipping it and then using it for the major blind spots, which is paper, um, wood flour for plastic, um, hempcrete,
I
animal
imagine any wallboard.
yeah, low quality. Like basically, you just a cellulose. You want something that's starting from an engineer's standpoint. They'd be like, I want something high cellulose. Well, hemp herd. So that's where I'd leave that. So we got three commodities off the field: the seed, which has been cut higher than normal, and so there's less of the stalk and there's more of the uh, chaff, which then could be a low-grade CBD oil coming off the combine. The tailings of the combine. So the seeds all being processed inside the combine, and the chaff, which is getting spit out the end. Well, you've got a lot less stalk and a higher concentration of the leafy buds. In theory, and I'm not pursuing this too much, but I hope somebody does, is that you could get a low-grade CBD oil out of that. And as breeders increase the concentration of CBD oil, CBD in the plant, you can have a dual purpose. I see it happening. It's inevitable. You've got breeders, brilliant breeders. Thank God for them, what they've done over the years, and they keep doing it. They're not stopping. They're not patting themselves on the back. Hey, good job. Let's move on to the next thing. No, they're still doing it. Now the CBD is a big thing. They're trying to, year by year, increasing the CBD content. So hypothetically, and it's actually viable, they've already got a dual purpose. Wajco has been grown in Kentucky since 2016. That's a dual purpose crop. Helena is another one. And up here in Canada, Anka is a good one. Canada, like Parkland Hemp Growers, Chris Federowicz there, amazing guy. His dad was one of the pioneers, and amazing guy. He let me stay at his place. Well, not really, down the road. He helped me down the road. I wasn't ready, but it's those connections that I learned, right? Failure is learning. And yes, I failed a lot, but I just never gave up. It was learning. And so now we're at the point where we're right at the doorstep. We're about to knock, and then there's this greed component rearing its ugly head. I know it's going to work out one way or another. We're going to work this out because this design is going to change everything because it's lending itself to working in the field. And so what we're hoping to see happen soon is hopefully through you or somebody like you to get us in tune with a purchaser that's like, okay, I've got your samples of ribbon. I see the potential, how a technology can provide this consistently. We will guarantee a purchase order of this many tons, and then I could take that, and it would have to be a guarantee that they buy it. Otherwise, it'd be like Consolidated Hemp Growers back in '99 that bankrupted a whole bunch of Canadian hemp farmers, basically decimated the fiber industry for years. So a guaranteed purchase agreement, and ideally a deposit. We take that deposit, we build the machine, and then we take that contract to the hemp farmer and be like, okay, we need to grow this much. So if you believe in us and you see what we're doing, I will grow this, I will babysit it, and then I've got a combine. And then what we would do is we'd go to their field when the time's right. We would harvest his tops, leave it in the windrow. We would harvest the leftover stalk right in the field. And then he would come in or she would come in a few days later once the seeds are at the right moisture content. They would be all collected. And then we would, I'd be inclined to be like, here, take the seed. That's what you're doing already. And then we'll give them a cut of the fiber and the core herd, just to get things started. And then once that model is perfected and other manufacturers and purchasers see, hey, the technology is the key. With that technology and that process of not letting it touch the ground and a programmed, certain strain, it's not like a free-for-all, oh, try this one, I'll give you that one, and you just take what I give you. No, it doesn't work like that. It's got to be consistency, and through consistency, we're going to scale it to the point where we're able to then duplicate that model, license it abroad, ideally in continents that allow for multiple crops per year, and then we're on our way. But I'm right at that point now where it's like, well, show us the video. Well, I'd love to show you the video. But at the same time, I'm in a bit of a tough spot. It's got to work out, but I'm stuck. So I hope you guys, keep up the good fight, keep getting people together. Know that there is another technology on the horizon, and it's just a matter of time that it's going to make it. So.
Well, and I think you said it well, right? I think I've seen more and more, a lot of the emerging technology is old processes or processes that were used, like you said, hand peeling, going back to this value of this ribbon and what's there, and compared to what we know and being able to explore, we're going to see a big influx of technology come in, just like we did in the CBD industry. And then we're going to see the new and emerging, right? We're starting to see other industries come into the hemp and other industries really emerge. And I think that's when we really open up these new opportunities. And then also, as fast as we can get it into our kids' hands, they will change the world with it. And they wholeheartedly, if we can pave the way and give them some direction or opportunity, I have to ask my kids how to download music to my phone.
Yeah, well, I don't know if a lot of people like to talk about this because it's uncomfortable, but giving kids hope.
Yes.
Because they've got technology at their fingertips. They know what's going on. They know what's going on in the Antarctic and the Arctic and how, the weather's going crazy. And it's scary. I couldn't imagine being a kid. You're like helpless to these politicians that are just haywire, whoever's got the most money. You're like, no, it's not about who has the most money. It's like, what is the best thing for society? And hemp is a good thing for society. No, you can't get high off it. Like, come on, people. Like marijuana and hemp, yeah, they look the same. I get it. Why you'd want to test it, but here's something. Why would you ever grow a marijuana field out in the open when you can get it cross-contaminated with hemp? You get a low-grade hemp marijuana. Who smokes low-grade marijuana? Nobody. Like, what is it, like 20-30% concentration now? You want, like, there's connoisseurs of marijuana. They would laugh at that. So really, you think about it, it should be 1% THC. Like, they're just doing the same thing in a different way. Instead of taxing it out, you have to bring it in because it'd probably be anarchy if they didn't. But let's keep that 0.3 THC, even though it's stupid. And it just restricts the market. Like it's like they're allowing it to kind of make themselves look good, but really they're still throttling the industry. And it's choking people out, Like there's guys that want to go big, and if their crop goes hot, then they lose their crop.
They're lost. The risk is too big. Yeah. And there has to be, and I think that as we're moving, I've had a number of interviews explain it really well, that one, the CBD market hijacked the hemp industry. It's not the same. I mean, really, when it comes to what our capabilities are, the way it's processed, the way it's grown, the male plant versus the female plant, especially in the textile, right? And it's an agricultural crop. I see cannabis, high THC and low THC crops as like a wine or a craft beer. They're grown the same way, right? Yeah. Or will be, yeah.
Yeah, well, CBD crops are grown differently or should be grown differently because they're more like a Christmas tree, right? Like you want it to look like marijuana because that's CBD in the buds, right? But, and so for our process, this whole influx of CBD, it's like, no, we can't use CBD. It's not a fiber crop, and there's way too much branching. But,
right. Well, and you just said it. Someone just asked a really good question. I wish I could see who it was. But what is the most important hemp innovation you've seen so far? In your opinion?
Hemp innovation that's like gone mainstream, or?
Oh, give me both. What do you think? What do you think is coming down the pipeline? And what's out there that you say that again?
Well, what's next, I think, would be what's coming down the pipeline is going to be carbonizing the fiber, or the ribbon, particularly, because then it becomes like any other carbon fiber. So that's going to be a big one. And then when people realize that the ribbon is the way that it was done at the beginning to get these lace and high quality clothes. And when it's degummed, it doesn't have to be coarse. Like you don't have to mix it with cotton. Like this is 40% cotton. I wish it was 100% hemp, but I would probably be scratching myself all the time. But the biggest innovation, probably, well, I hate to say it, but well, it's CBD. Like it's been big. I got to go. The seed being able to be used for animal feed. Little bioreactors. They eat the seed. They put it into their muscle tissue, and then it gets consumed by people. That's probably going to be one of the biggest innovations. So I'm really rooting for the seed market to get into the animal feed, because once that happens, and even the leftover biomass, like when they're chewing their cud and everything, or not chewing the cud, but they're chewing that biomass, the leaves for cows and whatnot, and pigs, that would be still, it's all good. Like there's nothing bad about the hemp plant. And that's why.
Well, and they're proving that now, right? I've seen a number of farmers that'll crack, they're chicken farmers, and they'll crack one that has been fed hemp and one that has not. It's been fed other grains, and the color of the yolk, the size of the egg, the omegas, everything about it that's better. It's just proving. And there's a lot of groups. There's a lot of groups out there now that are pushing the success of it. And so shout out to.
Yeah, well,
yes.
Because they're like little bioreactors. Like, you need a pharmaceutical industry to take that seed and produce, the components to all the nutrition. Like it's just blows my mind that, I don't know if this story is true, but there was a story about a monk who lived up in a mountain. He would take one seed and a glass of water a day, and he lived for like 40 days. Like it's just amazing. Like I'm just so in, like for them to say, what do they call that? The whole reefer madness and the devil's weed, and how these Christians think it's bad. I'm like, wow, are you ever confused? I think it's really a gift. Like how can it be that a plant that has never killed anybody, you can smoke it and you'll never die? How is that listed with heroin and cocaine? I don't get it. And still, it's like, what the hell? Like, there's something more at play, and that is a threat. It's a threat to the wood industry to a degree with paper, pulp industry, I should say. It's a threat to the oil industry with oil and plastic, and it's basically a threat to cotton, because and you look at those three mega, like just entrenched, super powerful commodities, and they're not going to give up without a fight. And then they're not going to be making themselves out to be bad guys. So they'll do little subtle things. Oh, let me buy your technology, and then we'll just shelve it. So we got to be really careful with who we're working with, and that's why I'm lucky, and I feel like blessed and grateful. It has been painful, but I know that suffering builds character, and it's going to happen. And I'm self-funding it, so I'm not expecting any money. I tell anyone that wants to help me or in any shape or form, and I really appreciate what you're doing, is let me prove it to you, and then let's work together. So I'm just at the point where I'm like, I'm waiting now too. It will work itself out, but it's now just time. So.
This is something that comes up. We only have a couple more minutes, but I want to address this because there's a lot of skepticism in people that are not really educated about the hemp plant or the potentials of the hemp plant, right? Or that were misled to think, it's you smoke. That's what you're doing with hemp. And they don't realize that when you look around, pretty much everything you see, you can be making out of hemp.
Yeah.
Making great. And so, say what?
Gasification, and maybe that would have been added to the other innovation we spoke of a little while ago, is gasification. It's World War II technology. It's all public domain. There is no patents on it. FEMA has it for emergency use. If all hell breaks loose, build a gasifier, and you've got fuel, basically. It's basically a form of wood gas, pyrolysis gas. It's all the same thing. Why not take that CBD leftover core, which is basically kind of useless except for animal bedding, and gasify it use it as a fuel. It's similar to natural gas. You can power a generator with it. You know, you can fuel a boiler. You know, heating. You know, like there's just huge like opportunity, and it's really the sky's the limit. And what happens is people just see all these things that can be done, and it just blows their mind, and then they don't do anything. It's like focus on one thing. So for me, it's not so much about focusing on the textile, like exactly what they need. No, let me get this technology perfected, and then we'll see what happens. But it's all about the ribboning and using the leftover seed fiber crop. And so that's been the whole basis of everything. But
well, and the dual crop, right?
Yeah, the dual crop is where it's at, I think.
To be food. You know, that's another thing that comes up a lot, and I'm curious perspective. I'd like to continue this conversation, but when we're harvesting crop for food versus fuel, you know, we're robbing Peter to pay Paul, and so I really am, you know, this dual crop is much more appealing when we're able to hit a dual market. It just depends on.
Yeah, but when you've got three commodities off of one plant, which is nowhere else, and no other plant can do that. And at least three, you know, it could be more with the CBD.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So when you've got that, those three commodities, you basically each one subsidizes the other. And right now, seed is at what, you know, non-organic, what, 65 cents a pound-ish, somewhere hovers around there. Organic's a little more, but you know, like biodiesel. I don't know if you know much about biodiesel, but Duramax diesel. You know, Isuzu motor, Duramax diesel. They've actually way buried, and this is again back in the day doing research, that they've warranted 100% hemp oil from crushed seed to go into their tank and power that engine will not void their warranty. Like it's freaking amazing. And the lubricity, which is basically, think of diesel as more of a lubricant and gasoline as more of a solvent. So with the diesel, it's actually better than diesel, but it on the downside, because I don't want to be that guy just all about pump, pump, pump. There's bad sides to that too, because it's organic and it's susceptible to organic like bacteria forming and gelling, you know, in cold weather. And so you add about 10 to 15% regular diesel, problem solved pretty much. And then you can modify that to a form of kerosene, and the whole jet industry, the whole, you know, like things change quickly. And I don't think it would be a threat to the food industry because there's just so much acreage and so many entrepreneurial farmers. And that's what I love about America is that you guys are so entrepreneurial. That's like, we'll every other country will do their own little thing, but you guys, you're like the Barnum and Bailey of the whole thing, you know? Like you bring it all together. I'm like a huge fan. And I live close to the border and I'm a huge fan of America. Like I don't want to be an American. Like it's kind of scary. But at the same time, you know, like the spirit. That spirit will never change. And that's what I love about you guys.
Well, and I appreciate rubbing shoulders with people like you and supporting this industry, right? We're gonna rise the tide, and all these boats are gonna follow right along. And so I'm just really passionate. I'm really passionate about connecting. I'm really passionate about continuing to develop this. If anybody else is looking to reach out to you, Pat, or wants to touch base on your technology or learn more about what they're doing, how do they reach out to you?
Website, which is maybe a little outdated. I am only updating it. So I'm kind of doing everything still. So forgive me if it looks a little outdated. I'll do an update soon. But info@canfiber.com is our email. www.canfiber.com is our website. Canfiber has its own LinkedIn handle. And then I'm just out there. My alter ego is on LinkedIn. You know, everyone has to pay for what their dream is. And for me, it's power generation, backup generators, you know, funds, everything. So when people try to connect thinking I'm a backup generator guy, I kind of ignore them. So I'm sorry, but you know, I like my alter ego. One day it'll be 100%, but you know, I gotta, you know.
That's awesome.
Gotta leave.
Well, if anybody else needs help reaching out or wants to connect, don't hesitate to reach out to me as well. Follow us on Global Hemp Association. Remember, our website is globalhempassociation.org. You can check out memberships, apply to be on the interview, as well as find any of our other past interviews or a few of them that are posted on the site. Pat, I invite you also. We've got an educational series coming up here every Thursday. I started hosting a couple weeks ago. I've done a few. I had Hannah from Czech Republic and Jeff actually from up in Canada, your way. But this month, speaking specifically to farmers, and it's Q&A format. I will share the link or drop the link and send you an email as well. But we're going to be breaking down different pieces of the supply chain. So next month will be the processing piece. I'd love to have you on for a potential Q&A panel with a couple of others where we can actually get in discussion and kind of move this along. What I find is sometimes when we host these, and myself included, if I don't understand, I just listen. And so I love having others that are actually, up to their neck in it because they understand and they can really push the conversation further. And yeah, so I'd love to invite you to join. I'd love to invite everybody else that's listening to also join. But yeah, other than that, we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Mandy. Really appreciate it. Thanks, everybody in the industry. Keep up the good fight. It's going to pay off.
Absolutely. We're in it together. Like I said, I invite you to join. I'm excited to continue this relationship. So thank you very much. Okay.
Oh, and on a side note, your partner, Michelle, says you're looking too skinny. So you got to start eating more, okay?
I love it. I love it. I love it. Okay. We'll see you. Hey, speaking of, we're going to be at NOCO this next week. So if anybody is going to be there and listening, give us a shout out. Are you going? No?
I'm there in spirit. There's a fellow Cameron there, and I'm going to be speaking to him actually after this. But yeah, cool. I'm there in spirit, and I'll get the blow by blow afterwards. But yeah, I'll feel the best there.
We'll be in touch. Okay, thanks, guys.
All right.
See you later.